Hello and welcome to the ArchDaily and LifeCycle series of talk. In this panel, we will discuss future cities and the crossover with technology with guest speakers, Kim van Hoslbeke, Design Director at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, New York office, Ariane Dingste, Director and Senior Architect at UN Studio, and Jacob Kirk, Partner at Hennig Larsen. Welcome, hi guys, and welcome to this conversation. So today's cities may face many rapidly rising challenges and opportunities, and the digital revolution is driving change in every part of our lives. Our guests will be sharing with us their ideas and their experiences on how we can build a better future. My name is Kisa Haru. I'm a content editor at ArchDaily, an architect and an urban designer, and I will be the moderator of this conversation. Hey everyone. So let's get started. So the first question goes for you, Kim. So the current COVID situation has a huge impact on the entire world. So cities, the epicenter of transmission of diseases, have been hit the hardest by the coronavirus. So do you think COVID-19 will change the way we design our cities? And do you think it's going to speed up existing evolutions?
Well, there's been a lot of talk and reading and writing about this topic, and so there's a lot of ideas out there. But I think regarding to the city, I think it's important to remember that this, first and foremost, is not a city or urban crisis. It's really a health crisis. And so when we look at the reason why there's urban questions about our cities, it's really through the lack of being able to deal with this health crisis, which is a unique event, has in some way, but on the other hand, it's already happened before. And so cities always came out through these events better than they were before. And so we should think and look at this event as an opportunity to make the city better than it already was. And the situation we're all in here is really about how to deal with the health crisis, and our leaders, partially inability, especially here in the States, to deal with it. A lot of the challenges of the urban fabric that we are now all really put in the middle is that we're missing the things we like about cities, which is the density, the social contact, the fabric. And we've been seeing that for the last 20 years as a big driver of society, both socially and economically. And I don't think this pandemic is really changing the course of cities and their roles in that path. I see it more as an opportunity to really see the things that were not working yet, like social fairness, enough access to outdoor space, about social equality. And so those things are highlighted very strongly in the pandemic, because those differences in different neighborhoods are becoming predominantly very visible.
So Ariane, the same question goes to you. Do you think we're gonna see a change of behavior in the design industry?
Yes, for sure. I think with every crisis, I think we see a big spark in creativity and solution finding. So I think there's the saying of never waste a good crisis. I think also really goes for this COVID situation. We can see that inside our office, we have several work groups, both from urban product design up to architecture, really working on this topic right now. And I think it's going to disrupt certain typologies of buildings that we have in our cities, and it's going to change the behavior of people in the cities. But I think it's going to be for the better. I think it really will spark our ideas. And I think, at least within Europe, we see that there's a strong urge to connect also this crisis in investments in what they call the Green Deal. So really focusing on the environment and sustainability as an opportunity. So really in these areas to kind of spark that evolution and thinking for our city. So definitely it will have a big impact, but I also see that it will have a positive impact. I think every crisis sparks that creativity and will kind of force us in new ways. We can simply not continue the way we were doing in the past. and it will mean a disruptive change on that level.
And Jacob, do you also believe that it's going to have like a positive impact, or do you think it will be just a short-term effect and then stuff will be back to the way they were before?
I think actually it's been an extremely healthy rain check on all of us, but also the planet itself, that we pulled the plug for some months. It might have been and will be super expensive, but I actually think the outcome of what happens post the COVID-19 is gonna make us all better, but also kind of make our priorities better going forward. We know that the world population is growing. Urbanization is kind of full steam ahead, but I think, at least for what we see here from a Scandinavian perspective, or kind of a design ethos, that the human scale, but also the diversification of how we create cities will be even greater after this. So I think it's for the better, but I mean, it hits us hard, all of us, but we have to look for the long term and kind of forget about the short term. So I also agree that it will disrupt, but I think for the better.
Right. So since now the concepts of community are unfortunately in a way dissolving in the midst of all this social distancing and social isolation lifestyle. So I want to ask you, how do you see the future of neighborhood, community, and social life in the city? And maybe Kim can give me his opinion on the American city.
Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned before, I think the neighborhood and the city as a critical aspect of our being in this world has been highlighted as being essential. No matter where you are, in the countryside or in the city, if you have a lack of social access and interaction, we are all craving for that. And so more than ever, and there was a lot of evolution and ideas rolling before the pandemic. And so I see really these ideas about how the social fabric is the catalyst of our cities and of how we engage each other is becoming really at the front of how we think about our neighborhood, how we design buildings, how to design neighborhoods, and what are the things in those fabrics that are essential to make them successful. The lack of these things is now highlighted, especially across larger cities and where some areas are very well provided by these amenities to provide neighborhood feels and access, others don't. And so that is highlighted. And so the need for good neighborhoods is just highlighted in a very critical way and emphasized as a critical point to continue developing. And this uses as a catalyst to really get leverage and a broader buy-in to support those needs.
Even with all the social distancing measures required now?
Well, the social distancing is the method of trying to manage the health crisis. And so I think like Arjen said, we're really looking at the long distance. We have to manage the health crisis now and work through it, finding a vaccine or being able to test more frequently. And once we have that in place, one can restart the social fabric of neighborhoods. And so that's really the crisis. We don't have a health solution to either manage or solve the health crisis that is putting us and disconnects us from the neighborhood. The long-term view is really looking at when we're past that, we've learned things that we're missing or lacking of, and maybe things that we should do differently to allow for a better utilization of the neighborhoods, both in normal condition, but also in case of a pandemic or a similar situation.
And Jacob, do you think that at Henning Larsen, neighborhood and community you will design them in a different way after the pandemic?
I hope there will be twice the size as before, because we can see the result of the master plans and the urban designs that we have done, that actually during the last months with COVID-19, the public realm has been used 2 to 3 times more than before. And that comes back to what we talk about, the need for social interaction. and we're not very good at being grounded in our homes for a long term. So I think there is an urge inside all of us that we would like to go out and meet and socialize, but it also comes back to the kind of the healthiness of things that we would like to move around and so on. So I think the spaces will remain. I think they will be more diverse in their appearance, but also certainly also in the performance of the recreational spaces that we are designing, both within the city, but also you can say in the suburban or even in the outskirts, because you have seen a huge shift of people who are kind of clustered in the cities. They want to get out, they need to get some space, but if you cannot facilitate them in the outskirts where predominantly elderly people, the ones who are the most vulnerable ones are, so they don't want to have people coming from the city out. So I think we end up in a kind of dilemma there. So, and we want to stay friends with all our relatives and families for a long term. So I think again, diversity in the public realm is going to be essential, so it can kind of absorb but facilitate the urgency, because you can say, I mean, in terms of buildings, we probably not going to go away from high rises and so on, but maybe we're definitely going to think about next time we go into a high rise, who I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with in the lift, even though it might be contactless in the future. But I mean, do I want to be there? And of course I cannot take the stairs from ground floor to the 20th or 25th floor, but if I can have a breathing space around it, maybe then we can all find a way how to deal with it.
Arjan, I think I'm pretty sure that you also like join in the same vision that Jacob and Kim have been talking about.
Yeah, so I think it's like that was mentioned. I think there are certain typologies of buildings that really need rethinking. Like, for example, high-rise typologies, they will be most challenging. And I think it's indeed about the concept of efficiency that we've been driving, of course, are a lot of our buildings in the past, and also our public space. And I think the social distancing is showing us where we are short in space, both on the public realm and inside our buildings. And that's what I meant also in the beginning. It really needs to provoke our thinking. And I think we also discover good sides. You know, I think a lot of employers see that actually that home working is not bad for people, at least not for productivity levels. And we see also, I think there was a recent survey where 50% of the people said they would really like to continue with a large portion of their work in home working. They also discovered themselves that it's working quite well. So the question is, what will this mean for our cities? Will this mean a move to the suburb or the outdoors, as was just mentioned? Or does this also work within a city framework? Because I think we also don't want to kind of promote even more heavier commuting. The public transportation systems are under quite some stress right now, and are also one of the other bottlenecks, I think, next to kind of high-rise typologies. So I think we are learning new ways. I think we're discovering our way in how that could potentially impact, but I also heavily agree we should not think from the current status of the crisis. We should really look beyond and see how our cities and our lifestyles have to evolve with that. And I think this is the important thing to address. And I think designers have a very important role in showing and guiding people towards these new paths.
And since everyone's like talking already about public spaces and transport, I want to ask you, like, do you think this pandemic is an opportunity to promote slow mobility and a healthier lifestyle and encourage people to walk and cycle rather than actually taking the car? And are you designing projects with extra focus on pedestrians, on bikes, and keeping the car away from the project? Can you let me know what you think, Jacob, about this?
Now we love our bicycles in Copenhagen here, so that seems to be a healthy mean of transportation also with the COVID-19. But I think you can say, when we think about cities and we want to take people out of the cars and into the public transportation, I think there have certainly been some challenges on how to cope with that, because I mean, the public sector have been reducing the number of trains and metro and so on. At the same time, we encourage people to, or we kind of reinforce people to use the public transportation. So that actually have meant that in a lot of the greater cities around the world, there's been fewer trains, and actually people have been more packed in it in a time where we need to keep the social distance. So there's something that we on a global level somehow we haven't really coped with or haven't been prepared for how to deal with that. I think all the largest cities or the cities with metros and so on, it actually took them a little bit a while to rethink that it's not about slowing down the number of trains, but it's actually speeding it up, because otherwise people will be packed and it's not good for the pandemic. But I think the way of living and using a city is not really going to change. I think there will be a stronger focus on the healthier lifestyle and activating what you do. And maybe this has just given us not a gentle but a firm push on this is very important, but also the importance of having large amenity spaces or breakout spaces within the building itself. Of course, you cannot, again, how do you go from the 25th floor and down and all? So there's been many talks of, we talked about the last 20 years about roofscapes and activating and so on, but we believe that the terminology or the use of amenity space and maybe the extent of the amenity spaces, I think, and I hope that there will be a change of how to see that and perceive that, but also hopefully there will be a demand for a greater and a more diversity of amenity spaces within an office space per se, because I think a kind of a more traditional core and shell office scheme, but just back to back with your colleagues, I think, or at least I hope that's a no-go in the future, if you don't have that breathing space one way or another.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask also Arjan, and what is what is your approach to future mobility after the pandemic?
Well, I think mobility, of course, is a very broad term. I think we've been working on some innovative concepts over the last years. Had the opportunity to work on cable car system design for the city of Gothenburg. We're doing one right now for the city of Amsterdam. And what we've discovered with these projects that of course people always look at it like, where can I put my skis to go up to them? And what we've seen is that this is actually frequency transportation, and it will not have waiting lines, and you can have very high frequencies in transporting people with having a new cabin coming every 40 seconds. And I think it's these kind of mobility concepts that work on high frequency instead of trying to push as many people in single carriages, to spread them more out, not having groups of people waiting together, but working with high frequency. And I think you can do the same for mass transportation on the level of metros and trains. I think on the level of like using bikes and pedestrian, I'm coming and working in a country where there are more bikes than people. On average, we have 1.5 bikes per person, and we're quite used to that as a means of transportation. I think it's interesting for us, like for example in Italy, that got like, of course, taxed by the COVID, that there certainly people really were starting to take the bike instead of using the car. I think it will provoke these kind of changes in cities where people actually could just as well take a bike. They're just not used to it. I think our kids can probably cycle before they can walk. And I think if this were where you grow up with, and this is the kind of framework in which you operate, then we will also drive our cities to facilitate that. So I think that's one of the positive aspects. It's not going to be the solution for everything. So we need to also solve it on the levels of mass transportation, trains, metro systems, and I think cable cars could be a good addition to that. And the thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is the individualization of transportation. I think we've seen pretty bad impact from concepts like Uber on the cities. I think, Kim, you can talk from New York, but you basically have empty cars driving around waiting to pick somebody up. think this is not the way to go. So if people only feel safe in their own cocoon I think this is definitely something we should not move into. So I think this would be, for us at least, one of the challenges that we really need to think about, like increasing frequencies, increasing capacity, but also how do these kind of station buildings function that facilitate people to use this transportation. And I think it's a bit trial and error right now with putting all these kind of stickers on public spots where you learn how to behave. And yeah, on a certain moment it will become a natural. But I think we need to really focus on the positive sides, but also find solutions for the things that will need to happen differently.
So now also,
Right.
like, we have Paris and London that are also following up the footsteps of Milan, and they're also repurposing their streets for bikes and pedestrian. And Kim, the question's for you now. How do you think New York is gonna follow in that trend, and especially that we all know the importance of public transport in a city like New York?
Right. Yeah, the health, I think mass transport is critical for high density urban fabrics. Like they can function without. And New York is one of those prime examples that, it's been a city that never sleeps. And the only reason it never sleeps is because the public transport kept running day and night. This pandemic actually created the very first time that subways closed to actually give the time to clean and purge every car and really deep clean it. So I think and it started also to show that the mass transport is the main means for the lower and middle class to commute to jobs that are not able to do from distance to remote. So I think the essence and the need for good and healthy public transportation is even again highlighted through these events that it's critical to allow for the society to work. And so there's going to be a different look. To date, it's been about capacity, and trying to just serve the exploding population. But I think the change that will happen is, and some transportation like airports, that trend was already happening about wellness and health, and how do we experience those nodes. And so in train station design and train cab design, I think that there's going to be a change in thinking more in regards to health and wellness and how we interact with those environments. And so that's a critical change. The other thing that happens is obviously the discovery. I think, like Arjen suggested, people suddenly realize, because they don't want to be in a subway, well, let's do a walk. Walking 10 blocks is not too bad. It's actually almost as fast as walking to the subway, waiting for the subway, and then going to your destination. So and the same with bikes. Like last weekend, I was biking around, and I've seen it change over the last 10 years here in New York, in cities like Mexico, where biking was like, oh, no, I don't go on a bike. So that's a trend that has been changing. And I think this COVID event has broadened that awareness to a much larger group, where people are now jumping on a bike. Suddenly the bike stores are like running empty with bikes. And so the city is also taking the opportunity, since there's nobody driving to the city, suddenly to change some of the streets and making them for bikes. And so these are the things where the opportunities rise, is to fast track things that were happening in a much bigger and bolder way, and use them as a catalyst to change how we commute and move through cities. And I think especially on the micro transportation, where it's for shorter distances, if we can enhance pedestrian pathways, bike paths, moped, like smaller steps, etc., for short distances, and take that pressure of commuter out of the mass transport and use the mass transport for the longer distances, we're going to get a much more integrated ways of transportation network in these urban cities, and give it a choice, right? If people are not comfortable at some point to go one way, there's a choice to do it a different way. So again, to me, it's really an opportunity to push forward the things we've all been talking about in a much bolder way.
So since
I think
yes,
if I can just reflect on, because I think I totally agree what Kim and Arjen is saying here. I think we also, we have to, there's two mindsets that will be really, really good to change. One mindset is the ones that the municipalities that require the parking ratios, even though we're not going to be using it. So if we look into life cycles and CO2 emissions and so on, why do we have to keep on providing the number of car parks in our buildings? It's expensive, and we don't want to, basically, a city don't want to get that amount of cars into the city. So if you could start to kind of bend the rules or challenge the rules in a way, I think that would be a good thing. But also the mindset of people, because I mean, we're working on a project in London at the moment, and when you're walking in the streets, I mean, in London and other cities, bicycling is considered as a sport. I mean, you can only be on a bike if you are dressed in a very super tight lycra and you have to run 50 miles an hour like you're in the final sprint of Tour de France. Whereas in Holland or Belgium or in Denmark, I mean, it can be a sport, but it can also be a way for getting A to B in a relaxed mode and enjoy life. You don't have to be super sweaty. You can actually wear normal clothes. But I think it's a mindset thing that I mean, slowly, but hopefully is evolving as well. But I think at the moment that where you can actually provide the bicycles in the streetscape, you can park them, but also that you don't have to provide the parking spaces, because when you provide them, people will use them, and we need to shift that a little bit or try to lower it.
Yeah, like a city as New York, 25 or more than 25% of the surface area is allocated for cars. When you think about that, it's crazy, right? And so if you would take even a quarter of that and transform that into other modes of transportation, other uses, public outdoor space, pedestrian paths, bike paths, that would be transformative for any city. So it's really about that opportunity and working with the municipalities to really help us to allow change to happen.
And since we are talking about change and design, I wanted to ask you, how do you think public spaces will be designed after COVID-19? Will this coronavirus also have an impact on how we design our public spaces, where people meet, where people gather, etc.? Especially like in a city like New York.
Well, I think what I think will happen is that there's, and I mentioned this before, it's more about the same needs are still going to happen, and it's creating a diversity of outdoor spaces. Some are more for individual, more intimate relaxation. Others are for collaborative socializing events, and anything in between. Some are greener, some are hardscape that are flexible for other uses to come in, that, you know, like markets and other social programming. I think there's just a bigger awareness that some areas, especially here in the States, some areas are very well served with a diversity of outdoor spaces like Manhattan. And part of it is because the constituents that live there support it, voted, politicians hear it. And then there's other areas of the cities that have a huge lack of those. And when we look at the caseload of COVID in a city like New York, a lot of times it's the areas in the city where there is a lack of ability to distance socialize, where more people live in very tighter quarters because they can't afford their house. There is not an ability to have outdoor space where there's room for relief in cases like this. And that's really where the higher cases are. And that's not just New York City, that's even in rural areas. And so I think it's about awareness of a equal access to those types of amenities in a diverse way. Because ultimately the city relies on every segment of the population to be an active and successful urban environment. And in New York, we have a whole section of a population that doesn't have that, is highly affected and can really contribute. And then there's a section that can operate in these unique circumstances. And so there's a huge disconnect. So that, I think, is more about awareness of where outdoor spaces exist and what types, and making sure that they're accessible to the larger society.
Arjen, in Europe, we are seeing now that a lot of unconventional uses are being introduced to public spaces. Like cities are opening up their public spaces for restaurants, for example, etc., to help the economy. So how do you think this can be a temporary approach, or do you think this will lead to a future like new design of public spaces as more, as Kim said, diverse entities?
Yeah, I think it's about distribution. I think we already have these qualities. I think that I think most European cities, they dwell on their kind of food and beverage features with terraces outside, and I think making now more public space available for that is really related to this kind of social distancing. I think what it shows is that this is the need of the people. People want to get together. They want to be able to sit in the sun and communicate and interact with people. And I think the question is probably much more about the diversity of use in public space. I think one of the concepts that the way we also look at buildings is like really kind of think about like how can you kind of program your day in a building. And I think you could look at the same way in looking at a city. And because when we look at a building, it's basically bringing the kind of features and the kind of freedom you have in a city inside the building. And I think this COVID situation shows us right now that the kind of diversity of use should be really addressed. And I think it's not only diversity of use, but it's also diversity in user groups. And I think we should look much more interval. I think there are really nice examples of where they bring, for example, kind of outdoor fitness possibilities together with play gardens to really kind of purge the kind of social interaction between different age groups. And I think you could look with the same kind of glasses to the kind of urban space. How can we create double usages? How can we have groups meeting that normally would not interact? And I think like there was the notion of equality and access. And I think we need to look where are things distributed in the city? Where can we connect programs? Where are things missing? So people don't have to move around on the city without any reason, just because it's not there. So I think it will spark the thinking, and I think it should be much more thought through on thinking through the time of the day and thinking from different user groups to really get that diversity in and the double use in a smart way, but also distributing it equally over the cities so that the accessibility is also solved.
Jacob, so talking from the Danish experience of public spaces, what can you tell me about these this diversity in spaces, in these outdoor spaces?
I think it's quite important that they are adaptable, not only in size but also in use. The more the merrier. So they're not reserved for a few, and a sign that says "Please don't enter, or don't touch." It should be the opposite. We also see kind of a great appetite and interest in taking part of the local community. So we are all on our phones and gadgets and flying around the world and so on. But when you are home and when you want to take part of the local community and kind of you enjoy taking part of the urban farming, and you support the local microbrewery and the local football club or whatnot. So I think also what the two gentlemen are saying, I think there's somehow you downscaling the cities, or you start to understand your local neighborhoods a little bit more. Somehow they become smaller communities that then have a distinct identity and use, and you are kind of that you know who's around, and you feel safe and protected somehow. And that also is related to how you use the public realm and the recreational spaces. And it's important that they can be used for all. It's not only the ones who are super fit and slim and fast, but you can actually just take your blanket and use it and as in the same way as anyone else. So in that sense, I think this about the performance of the spaces are really, really important. You should feel at home, and you should take pride of the spaces that you are within.
Should feel like you belong to these public spaces in your city.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Okay, so let's discuss a little bit. Let's talk about technology. And I want to ask him, what is your experience with like new technologies that could impact our ways of living and how we design and construct our cities and buildings?
So it's an interesting topic, because when you look at, so there's two questions that in that one question. One is, how do we design and construct, and how is technology changing that? I would say, reflecting back on, the last 50 years, the real estate construction world has changed very little on how we do things to a certain degree compared to other industries. Yes, we work a computer, but we still draw, in a different medium. But how we build, how we create, at the grand scale, we haven't changed a lot compared to our daily life. But I think the last 5 years that has started to change. So awareness of efficiency, of how we use materials and sustainability, and how we produce an AI. And so I think there is a small wave that has been happening kind of independent of COVID. But just historically, our industry has been slow in adapting those new technologies. The design world has started to change, and now I think the production fabrication is starting to change, partially bringing things back locally. On how technology changes how we interact with buildings, I think the COVID event is gonna fasten certain technologies that maybe before were seen as nice to have but not essential. And so the way of monitoring a building and the healthiness of the air, or not having to touch things, before they were kind of gadgets or somebody had a vision to be an extra healthy building, those are going to become much more essential rather than bonuses. And so I think the COVID is going to open up the idea of embedding technology in our daily lives and how we interact with buildings.
So Ariane, I guess it's the same question for you. How can technologies impact our life furthermore?
Well, yeah, it's a very broad question. I've seen over the past years that we shifted in our office with a strong focus, let's say, from sustainability, really from the energy side towards health. Also, Ben van Berkel, the founder of our office, has been holding the chair at Harvard around the subject of health and architecture. And he's been driving our studio quite heavily on research, but also implementing that. And we've been trying to do that in our buildings already over a long time period, much more focusing, for example, on how we could create the freshest air in an office environment. What kind of systems do we need for that? How do we support that from the actual design of the building? And I think this is something where we really see it paying off also in post-occupancy research, that it has an enormous impact on sick leave, on the productivity in these buildings. So we see a shift that started, let's say, over the last 5-6 years, really materializing right now. And we think we're on the right path with that solution. In essence, we always look at towards the outside, at the environment, and how can we reduce the energy use of the buildings. And now suddenly we are realizing that our bodies are simply not built for sitting inside. Our buildings are, in essence, unhealthy environments. Our bodies need high levels of daylight that you can actually only experience to be outside. Our bodies still think we're hunting on the fields with some spears, because evolution simply goes so slow. And this is where we think we should focus on design. So that's bringing nature into the building, the notion of biophilia, looking really on how can we create the best fresh air. And I think especially in this COVID situation, I think it's a major driving principle that we can show our clients that we simply push the dirty air, for example, against the ceilings instead of mixing fresh air with dirty air. These are strong concepts that really speak to people's imagination now. And I think over the past years, we really had to convince our clients on the importance of these aspects, and now it comes as a natural. So I think it will continue. And then I think that the third notion that comes together with that is the use of let's say, digital technology in buildings, which I still think is very much driven from the technology side and not so much from the human side. So I think the examples that we've seen over the past years are really more on the gadget level. It's nice that you can use your phone to steer the lighting in a building, but I think it's really not the future. I think we want buildings that predict usage. So I think we should really have the uses of AI in buildings to really make the building functioning, let's say 95% of the time, to kind of how it learned from its users, how it should perform. And then, of course, there should still be choice in the buildings, because that's the main thing that is driving people, both in cities and in buildings, that if people don't have choices, they're simply not happy. Now, in this situation of kind of working from our home environments, we didn't have a choice. And then you see this kind of strong urge on going out, going to meet people, and we kind of suddenly start valuing these aspects. And we think it functions on every building typology in the same way, that the building should kind of predict and provide options for people to choose from, but it's the individual that can choose, related to the kind of work he has to do or the kind of activity, what kind of environment fits best to them. And I think the digital technology can really support in that. So I'm not seeing it so much as a drafting tool, but much more on an interactive tool, offering you choice and possibility. So yeah, I think it's exciting times on that level. And yeah, we really kind of drive a lot of research on that, and we really try to promote this thinking with our clients to really go beyond what our current understanding is of a building.
And Jacob, do you think that new technological advancement will change drastically how we change our cities, or are they just gonna stay as a tool?
I mean, it can easily just be a gadget, but I don't think it will kind of disappear either on the short or long term. I actually think the whole digitalization for us now, we are architects and we are creating buildings and in cities and so on. I actually think it's probably the greatest opportunity, but also responsibility that has come to the field of architecture, because finally it's not only a matter of taste and look and feel and passion and so on, but it's actually now we can both inform what we are designing, but we can also prove of concept. We can work on an evidence base rather than taste and so on. So I think that's a huge step forward, and as I said, it gives an opportunity, but also I think it gives a responsibility for us being architects creating the cities and the buildings. And then you can say within our design methodology, I actually think it's a fantastic relief again, because having these tools actually enables us to focus on the creative part and the making of things, because I mean we can script and all do things, so the repetitiveness and so on, and you can say getting all the data in, I mean, working off databases and so on. We don't have to go to the library. We can sort of do simple things, and then we will get the information. Again, I think that will free up time to actually work closer and more continuously on the creative part. What we are designing in terms of buildings, I mean, what we are and how the buildings are performing on the short, how they're performing on the short and the long term, I think that's about to be seen. I think we need to get over the gadget feel, and I think the worst term I can think of, that is when everyone go to a conference and talk about smart cities. I mean, it becomes, I mean, it's almost like a supplier's Christmas evening, because it's all about what can you sell and can you put all sorts of things and devices on your building and inside your building. But where's the whole human aspect of side and the healthiness and the well-being and all that? I think that has to come first. So it's also, by that I mean, it's important that the technology is driven by humans and it's not the other way around. Otherwise, we're going to fail big time.
So guys, I want to talk a bit about your personal projects, and let's start with SOM. So Kim, which of your projects in the pipeline are you particularly looking forward to, and why?
Well, particularly we just finished design development on a project in my studio in Buenos Aires, Catalina, Rio, and it's an office building, but we, with the client's vision of doing something different, we were really able to rethink what you would typically think for a spec office building, what it would do. It's like in downtown Argentina, a country and a city that's been going through really rough times over the last 10 years, and being part of a team where there's an idea to reposition the downtown. And while being a commercial building, it really became about repositioning a neighborhood and extending and creating connectivities in the zone where we're building. And so the heart of the project there is really about creating a neighborhood point, not just for the building, but actually for the larger community, and be a hinge point in activating underutilized land that is literally right there and gives that access to the outdoor space. And so it really embeds a lot of the items we have been talking about here about access to the outdoors, community engagement. And so I'm very excited about that project because it embeds all those ideas before the pandemic already, and it just proves that the essence of that idea is the right one.
Jacob, which particular project are you looking forward to?
I assume I cannot set all of them, but I think it's I think the ones that we are doing at the moment that really is high on the agenda here is the transformational projects, the things where basically we are leaving things as they are, and we are kind of really reinforcing the narrative about the legacy before we kind of move forward. And we're doing the transformation of the Royal Shipyard in Poland as an example. So really preserving the past and bring that into the future. I also think that we're working with Volvo, and here it's about understanding the future mobility, but also working here with 100% wood building, a wood structure. So think again that we are thinking into recycling and upcycling, and we're looking into the CO2 emission of a building, and it's not something that is going to look good for the next 20 years, but really thinking about the longer runs and the commitment to a society or a nation. So the big picture is super fascinating, and there's so many opportunities, but we have so many things to learn, and that's probably why we all enjoy what we're doing here, because we can make a difference, and people are looking at us.
Definitely. And Arjan, what exciting project is you and studio working on?
Well, we're a large practice, like the colleagues here in the call as well. Project I'm particularly looking forward to. We have a big headquarter building that is part of a mixed use in the city center Amsterdam, under construction right now. So we really have seen that going up, and luckily the construction side is still going on, and that building will really emphasize a lot on this kind of healthy building aspects. So it will have really kind of smart climate system, but it's also really community building. And it also showed us that it will ask for different means of transportation. We will have 5,000 employees working in this building, and it will just take 50 parking spots. So it also shows the value of putting these kind of mixed-use developments in kind of city center areas instead of putting them at the outskirts. And so that's one of the projects. We just completed transformation of a 1960s building, where we really kind of stripped it down to its structure and really sculpted a new building out of it, like really living up to current day standards. So it's very exciting to work with kind of something that somebody else created in the past, and seeing how you could make something new out of it instead of tearing the whole thing down and putting something new on the same spot. And like I said, like we're working on the Amsterdam cable car right now, which is a project that was initiated by 2 citizens. So it was also crowdfunded in the early stages, and it was really brought up from the citizens to the attention of the public authorities, which kind of embraced the project right now. So it's quite exciting to think about new ways of public transportation, and really working with citizens that brought that idea up as an idea. And I think these are very powerful projects that people really drive it from their hearts, instead of like from kind of commercial aspect, but really seeing the need in a city on both on levels of connecting city parts that were separated by a river, but also looking at sustainability aspects. So there's a lot of exciting projects in the pipeline, and the diversity drives us, that we can really connect the skills between projects and move thinking from one skill to the other. So it's exciting times.
Well, good luck for everyone with the future projects. And to wrap it up, I want to ask you if you want to share one final thought with the audience. Whoever wants to say anything.
I think the thing that I want to give along, I think we're all quite kind of not knowing what hit us, I think, in the beginning of this pandemic. And I think it's very important to keep positivism. And I think we should really see the opportunity that this can really provoke us in our creative thinking, but our creative thinking will also be essential to find ways out of this pandemic crisis that is now turning into an economic crisis as well. And I really see that this will also learn people that we have to do things different, and now is the time. I think it's really as disruptive, I said in the beginning of this talk, that people are open, have their minds open to new ways of thinking right now. That's what I would like to kind of bring out, to keep up the positive spirit and really think how our creativity can support these changes.
Yeah, I would reiterate that similarly, that while we're all cooped up in our houses, the things that we miss now, we realize how important they are, and really see them as an opportunity to think about them as just individual citizens, and push the larger community to really fight for the importance of those things. And us as designers, where we're kind of multifaceted, always connecting different aspects of life and society, we have a really important role in helping to push that forward on our projects, but also on the policy side, because at the end, policy is a key component to drive change.
I think this has been, I mean, it's really a point of time in all our lives, so that we should really kind of pause down and really rethink them and spend time on things that matters and where we can make a difference. And by all means, we're all enjoying being on this planet. We should preserve it, and as it was our, like the one and only baby, and because there are kids and generations to come. So we slow down a little bit and spend time on things that create value and make yourself happy.
Thank you so much for your time, Kim, Arjan, and Jacob. It was really a pleasure talking to you. And good luck with all your future projects, I would say.
Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you.